Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll this Gittin daf Pei. We're going to begin on Pei Amud Aleph, 6 lines from the top. We are in the middle of the Mishnah. Now the Mishnah began on the previous Amud talking about how it was necessary to write the get exactly the correct way, and even if you would have deviated from writing the correct malchus, the correct monarch, and writing a different monarch or one who doesn't exist anymore, in all those situations, the law is that it's not a get, and therefore all of these laws apply as we saw before, namely, just for some, there's no ksuba, there's no peros, there's no mazonos, and now along those lines of all the different laws that are connected to it, we say the following: Kol arayos she'amru, when it comes to all the arayos which are discussed in the beginning of Masechtas Yevamus, sirasein mutaros. So, for example, let's say you have a man who died. Now, normally, if they die childless, the halacha is that there's a din yibum, that his wife has to marry this man's brother. Now, the problem is, what if this brother is related somehow, one of the arayos, to this woman? So obviously he can't do yibum with her, but that's obvious because it's an ereva. But not only is she pater, but also if this man who died had more than one wife, and he had a co-wife, so the co-wife, it's called the Sarasayan, are also going to be mutter. So that's the very basic law as found in the beginning of Amos. Now, in that situation, let's say Holchot Saros Elu Venisu, because they think it's okay, so they go and get remarried, this woman, because that's what we said is allowed. But Venimsu Elu Ionis, it turns out the one who was the Ereva to this brother was actually an Ionis, which means she was someone that could not have children, or more specifically, she therefore has a relationship that the original husband, the man who died, were not really halachically married because it was like a mekachtos, which means now the tsara, the co-wife, really is zokuk or was zokuk liyavam because she is a healthy woman and she was supposed to be able to marry him. Now again, we didn't know that her co-wife was an ionist until this point. So the din is teitzim zem zem v'chol hadarachim eluba. So let's look at Rashi. Kol arayish amru sarasehin mutaros. The co-wives are mutar. Chamish esrei arayos she'amru chachamim shir sarasehin mutaros inasim b'shuk below chalitza. So that's the din, as we said, that she doesn't have to do anything. Certainly there's no yibum, but there's also no chalitza either. Kishemesu balehin b'lubanim, in a situation where, of course, we're talking about her husband dies without children. If they had children, then obviously there'd be no zika. And then it turns out that she is an islandess. V'nimsu ha'arayos islandess, says Rashi, v'gali milsa shahi kedushi hameis b'tois. The whole marriage was really a mistake. V'nimsu shlu hayu el sarasehem. He was really only married to this one woman who technically therefore is allowed to marry the deceased man's brother. Therefore she's not really pater from anything. And therefore because of that, she's teitzi mizeh mizeh, and all the matters apply. And Rashi says, it's like Rabbi Kiva who says, Yesh mamzer michavi lavin. Okay. Hakainis is yivimtai. Now if a person marries his yavama, which again, what happens, her husband died, they were childless, so now the brother marries her, v'holchat sarasa, and her tsara goes, v'nises l'achar. So because the brother did yibum, so now the tsara, the co-wife, goes and marries someone else, because since the zika is gone, so now she's allowed to go, says Rashi, because v'kaimalan, bias ha'achas potera sarasa, that once you did bia with one of the women, so then the other tsar is mutter. So v'nim sezusha ha'isa islandess, it turns out the one you did the yibum with was actually an islandess, which means that was really not a marriage, therefore you really were supposed to do yibum with this other woman who left. So again, teitz mezeh mezeh v'chol derachim heluba. So all the matters are the exact same. Oh, okay. Ksav Seifer. So islandess ve'ein lo yibumin shahar lo ashes hameis haisa v'nimsa shlo nifter at saras v'nisas b'shuk b'lo chalitza. And she got married without chalitza, which is not okay. Ksav Seifer get leish. So a sofer wrote a get for the man, v'shoiver leisha, and a receipt for the woman. V'ta, and they made a mistake. V'nasan get leisha v'shev leish. He gave the woman the get, the sofer. Now the husband's supposed to give the get. So what's supposed to happen is the sofer writes the get and gives it to the husband will give it to the wife. Instead, the sofer accidentally gave the get to the woman and the shiva to the man. But nasu zelazen was given to each other. L'achazman hari haget hayoitzi. It turns out that the get is in the man's hands, and the receipt to the woman's hand, because obviously it wasn't done properly. It wasn't given to the right person. Rabbi Lezer Aimer depends. If the mistake was discovered immediately after the divorce, then we say it's not considered to be, it's not a get. We'll see what alter means. But if the mistake was discovered after some time after the divorce, then hariz a get in fact is a get. It's going to have to understand what that means. Lo kol himenu min harishon l'abid zechuso shel sheni. The first one is not so powerful to remove the second. Says Rashi, ein hakol kedavarav lahaminoi. His words are not so strong. L'abid zechuso shel sheni. Says Rashi, shenasa, the second woman he married. Diamrinan, maybe we're going to say knuyahi b'neim. Maybe there was a trick with the ex-wife. The khalifa hashtaros, they swapped the documents after they got married. In other words, maybe this woman, again, there's an issue of machzir shasai. So maybe what ended up happening was like this: you got married, you got divorced, and then it was legitimate. The man had the receipt, the woman had the get, and then she got remarried. And then let's say this woman and the first husband say, you know what, I wish we can get remarried, but it's an isser machzir shaso because you're now married. So what we're going to do is we're going to pretend that the get and the receipt were given to the wrong person. So therefore, it'll act like we were never divorced. So this way we can get remarried. So because of that, he says, no, we're not going to do that. The only time we're going to say if it's lachar zman after a lot of time elapsed. So we're concerned that this may be their motivation. So let's see the Gemara. So it says Gemara, "My malchus she'eno haygena." So the Mishnah said that if you write on the get about a malchus which is not proper, then it's not good. So my karli malchus she'eno haygena. Why do we use that term? Mishum de'en lahem lo ksav lashon, because it's referring to a language that doesn't have script and a language. Right, it's from some other nation. They adopted a language, but it's not an original language. So where it's not really an impressive country. So why do we need to mention malchus? Mishum shol malchus. Says Rashi, shehilanu shalom imahem. We want to have peace among the country we live in. Shiyomer, they'll say chashuvim anu beinehem. We're considered chashuv. Shekaisim shtarosehen. Bishmeinu, that when we write our documents, we mention them. So therefore, it's a way of creating harmony. Gemara says, 1 second. Mishum shom malchus teitziv avad mamzer. Well, why would the child be a mamzer? So he didn't write malchus. So what? Why is that such a big deal? It's still a problem. Because that he said, anyone who deviates, even ever so slightly from the laws of the get, the din is that the child will be a mamzer, and Tate said they have to leave. So let's look at TB 19. Let's see what I wrote. I'm sure I got this one right. Seems like an easy question. Anachnu mesachne malchus begittin lekabel saver panim yafos malchus v'shalom b'medinoseinu she'anachnu noisel lehem kavod b'shtar shalanu v'im kaisvin malchus shehu mibzoyin lamelech v'hu otsuv, will be upset she'anachnu kaisvin al ha'ish she'eino she'enu kamohu b'glal zeh get posel b'pnei hasakana. That's not exactly what the answer is, but it's like Rabbi Meir who says if you're mashana matbeya shatov chachamim, then that's a mamzer. Okay, so that was TB19. All right. Well, Shum Malchus Yavin. So why do we mention all these different cases? Just if it's not the right one, that's all we can understand. So if you wrote for the Greek Malchus, because there were kings there. Malchus Madai Malchus Yavan in the past, Madahavihavi. If you write, oh yeah, it was so great when we're living in the United States, we start writing about how there was British occupation. It's like, who cares? That was the past. We know it's not true anymore. So you're writing a little history lesson or something. That shouldn't offend you. The Yashmina Malchus Madi Malchus Yavan Mishum de Malchusahavi. They did exist, and therefore, why are you acknowledging them? Avol binyan habayis, when it comes to the base of Mikdash, Mad Havi. So you're talking when time of the Chorban, you mentioned it's like time of the base of Mikdash. Yashmi'inan binyan habayis the Amri mid kidemakri shavachayhu, because at least you're mentioning its praise. Avol Chorban habayis that Sarhu, you're mentioning tragedy imolotzricha. Okay. Says Rashi, Mishum de Malicha, Achshav hi moilechas. Now they're kings. Lafika chiskane b'hamelach shel malchus zu v'yachbin menu. So if you start writing about King Jong-un in North Korea, so it's offensive because what do you mean? Why are you showing allegiance to that guy? You don't live in that country. Madahavi havi, or you mentioned in the past, what was Kfar Avru. So they aren't around anymore, so maybe you wouldn't be upset since they have no power. Okay. Weiter. So you write the east and it's the west near the east. So man. So who is this referring to? The husband. If you're mentioning about the husband's city, so it already mentioned that's problematic. It says Shem Iro. So what are you saying? Now have Sefer. We're talking about the actual scribe. So Kidi Amr Lahu Rav Lasafre, he wrote to a scribe, Rav Huna Lasafre, Kiyas Vinu B'Shile, when you're in Shile, Kisovo B'Shile, write that you're in Shile. V'yafagav de Mimso Lachu Mili B'Hine. Even though you may end up giving it in Hine, and when you're sitting in Hine, Kasobo B'Hine, you should write Hine, that city. So it's totally on where you're writing it, which is what we actually do on a get. In a get, we don't mention Bizman Hazeh, the name of the person, let's say the husband's city where he's from. But we do write on the get the name of the city, as well as a siman, some type of natural connection to the land, about the waters, Meberos, or different things that are mentioned, which are unique to that city, something which doesn't change. So that's something which needs to be done. That's what it means by the cipher, that he has to write down the place where it's being written. Amr Rabbi Yehuda, Amr Shmuel. So Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel as we continue to pay Amud Beis. Zudiv Rameir. This sheet is like Rameir. Says Rashi to get Pas Mishum Shel Malchus. Of Chachamim Armim Afilu Kasav Ella Lashem Santar. If Shibeir Harizim Migrash. If all you did was write the name of the elder in the city, it's still a get. So Rashi quotes this in Gemara in Baba Basra, which explains exactly what is the Santer. Fine. Basically, if you write how long this elder was in power, Hahugita dahavi ksiv be l'shem it's tandura. So there was a get that was written for this tandura de bashchar, this governor of the king. Rashi says shiltain shel bashkar abdai shel melach, like the servant of the king, and they mentioned his name on the get. Shalcha Rav Nachman Barav Chistel Kamei de Rabba. So ki agav demai. What's the din is this get acceptable? So Shalachle Baha fil Rameir Moidi. Even when it comes to Rameir, who normally has an issue, he'll still say it's okay here. My taima mioisa malchusu, because it's still the same malchus, and therefore the whole issue is writing a different malchus. But if it's the same malchus, but there's just a different figurehead, someone maybe not the head of the malchus, but someone who is also a prominent figure, that's also acceptable. So my shnam is santer shimeir. So why, when it comes to the santer shimeir, the chachamim say it works, and not Rab Meir, because hasam zila luhu milsa, because it's a degrading thing. Hacha shvichahu milsa. But when you mention the eved, so it shows the chashivus of the actual leader. Okay, it says Rashi zilhu milsa shin shultanus gerua mizu. There's really nothing lower than being a santer. It's not really an impressive job. Uboisha sulamel. It'll be embarrassing to the king. Shenisker zed. You mentioned his name. This guy who's just a santer, someone who is not so important. Rashi explains he's an expert in nachlas gavul, stay, kol ish ish. Like he knows the boundaries, right? So that's not such an impressive position. So if that's what it was, so you have a machlokas of the santer, you write the santer shebir. However, if it's tandara the bishchar, that's okay. Amarav Abba, Amarav Huna, Amarav Zu, Divra Meir. Everything again is Rameir. Kosher. So we see that in this situation, if you're Mishana, still the child is a mamzer. Even though they say the child's not a mamzer, they will agree. If you deviate on that level, then in fact the child will be a mamzer. Amarav Ashi Afanamatanina. They have to both leave, the first and the second husband. The whole hadarachim ha'eluba, and all the dinim are the same. Haman katani la'ilim Rameir. So if you want to tell me that sheet is like Rameir, so Rabbi Ninu, then they should all be coupled together, all these different cases. Because it must be that this is according to the sheet of the Rabbanan, and nonetheless we see that in that situation, even they hold it will not be good. Question 7. So we said that it's harizum grashes, and the child is not going to be a mamzer. The child will be kosher. Okay, right. Let's continue by the 2 dots. Kol rayas shamru chulu. So he said, in the situation we have a rayas, where you have a situation where the man died with 2 wives. So because this woman is related, there's an erva to his brother, so obviously she cannot marry the brother because they're related, but also her co-wife. Now what happens if this co-wife gets remarried, and in the interim we find out that this woman who was the erva was really an islandess, which means that she was really never married to the first guy, so we say Teitzim Zemazu. So Nisu in. If she got married, yes. Because she can't marry the Yavam. Zinu loy. However, if it's the Tsaras erva, then we don't say that is the din. Look at Rashi. Zinu lo. Einu asur l'siyavim. So she's not asur to do yivam. The nisu chomer, the woman who got married, is more strict. Shema yomer cholotzla, we're concerned that this woman who ended up getting married, they'll say chalitza was performed. The nises, she got remarried. The chazal kansa mission is garsha, and then she went and got remarried after the divorce. There's an issue of lo yivna, that once there's an act of chalitza, so then you no longer have the ability to do yibum. You cannot marry her. So therefore, that's the reason why we're strict when it comes to yibum, which I believe is one of the questions here. Question TA 19, which is, I got this completely wrong. This is not an easy question. It says, Kol rash yomer sorasei mutaros, madua asuros l'syavim. Why is it usher to do yibum, and this situation? What's the problem? So the answer is Shema Yomru Chalat Zeh. Maybe Chalitza was done with the other one. Now Vanasa Zu. Now you're going to marry and do Yibum. The Nimsa Naisa Chalutzasai. You're marrying the one that Chalitza was done, and that cannot be. That's not allowed. Okay. Weiter. Zinu. So Zinu Loy. Okay. The Saras Ereva is not usher to do Yibum. The one who was married cannot do Yibum. It has to leave. However, the Zinu, the Tsaras Ereva, the one who's related to the Ereva, we do not say that. So you have to Rav Hamnuna. Diyomi Rav Hamnuna, Shomeres Yavam, Shazinsa, Yavam. We said that there's Shomeres Yavam. So you have a woman who's the Shomeres Yavam, which means her husband died, and so therefore she's Zokuk. She's supposed to marry the brother, but she didn't do it yet. So she's a Shomeres Yavam. Let's say in that process, if she was Mazana, the din is she's usher to have Yibum. Well, this seems to be a similar situation. Not that she necessarily intended to have Znus, but because it was an improper relationship, so therefore she should not be allowed to do Yibum. So how can we say that the Tsaras Ereva is allowed to do Yibum? Lo, Nisu, we're talking about the one that got married. V'hu adin lazino. The din is so too the Tsaras Ereva. V'adetani Nisu lishnamalia nakat. Yikad yamri Nisu v'hu adin lazino. Solim asayil Rav Hamnuna. This proves him. The Yom Rav Hamnuna shemesh yom shezinsa asuli yavama, that she's also allowed to do Yibam. Lo Nisa davka mishum the mechalfa be'isha shahach ba'al medina siyam, because it can be confused with a woman who goes to Medina Siyam, says Rashi. Let's say, Uvo v'oimrula meis balech. People say that your husband died. V'nises, and she gets married based on that testimony. Dasrinin la lamehedar. She's not allowed to get remarried to this guy after the fact. V'yafal pi shiva oinis. Now she got remarried by mistake. She didn't realize that it was just that her husband went to Medina Siyam, he was really alive. She was saimich on this. Yishem Shema Yomer Girish Rishon. People will say that really she was divorced. V'nasa zen, she got remarried. The Chazar Harisha, now all of a sudden this new husband's coming back. V'hechzira la'achagrushi sheni, after the second guy. Nimsa maxagr shaso mishanises. Once she's married, she cannot. And then she marries the second man. Now she can't go back to her original husband because that's Maksar Shaso. Now, the truth is, maybe she halachically really wasn't married to the second guy because she really didn't have ability to be able to marry him because he was never dead. But nonetheless, people are going to think that it must be the fact that she got remarried was because she legitimately did so, because her first husband did give her a get, and therefore, how was she able to go back? So, Hachinami Amrin Hacha Shema Yomer Cholotze, people are going to say the same thing, that maybe Chalitza was actually done. But Nasazeh, and therefore that's why she got remarried. And then people are going to think that she's going back to this original guy after Chalitza was already done and she was already married. Znus, when it comes to Znus, Leisle Kala Kulihai, there's not going to be such information. Umedi Yadai, people know the Piritsusa Havoy. They're not going to actually think that Chalitza was done. Okay, shtickle difficult, but that's the pshat. Okay, a kindness says Yavimtai Hu. So in the first case, Yibum was not performed. That Yibum was done. Maybe the din isn't the same, that they should just take the Yezemazeh. All the women fell to Yibum. Maybe she should have waited until the co-wife shows that she wasn't denial in this. So what does it mean, the altar? That if it happens right away, we say that it's not a get. So Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, this is going to be question 8. Mahu altar. So one answer is Kolzman Shiyoshiv Asukavoisa Indian. As long as they're still talking about the divorce, even though the divorce was given, the Sukavoisa Indian, that's enough to consider it that it's so fresh that we're not going to be concerned that they came up with this strategy to switch the documents and they were really properly divorced, but they're going to pretend that they really didn't get divorced, so they can get remarried again. Now, when it's something which is so alter, we're not going to be concerned about that because they were oisukin ba'oisa inyan. Zel alter. Amdoi, if let's say they stood up, zel achrizman, that's afterwards, and therefore at that point we're now concerned. Rabbi Adabaravo says different answers. Lo nises, if she did not yet get remarried, zehul alter. Nises zehul achrizman. And it makes sense. Because if she didn't get remarried to a second guy, so then what's the problem? Because there's no issue of Max Gershasai. So why would we be concerned that they're making this up? Maybe they're telling the truth. That really wasn't a good get. Because the reality is they can get remarried anyway. Tanah. The first guy doesn't have the ability to remove the second guy. Now, Bishlam I can understand when you have the reasoning of Rav Adabarava of getting married. That's why we're mentioning a second guy, right? Because there's a first man and a second man. Because he talks about that altar, and that altar is referring to getting remarried to another man. That's why he mentions a case of another man. El Shmuel, my sheni. What does it mean, sheni? It's talking about oisa inyan. There's no second husband over here. There's no second man. So in this pei aleph amud aleph suchus haru'ui l'sheni. Says Rashi, Mishiyat sasam lifnei edim, when they leave from the witnesses, becheskas megreshas. So she has a chazak of being divorced. Zaksal yinasal esheni. She has the ability to marry a second guy. It doesn't mean that she actually did marry a second person, but there is this assumption that now she's divorced and therefore she can marry someone else. So if it was after they're no longer a sukkah Indian, they got up. At that point, we say we're concerned of this potential trickery. Adkan.